We'll go over chapter 9. See, there's the sad face again. What is that? I don't get it. I don't understand why it's doing that. There we go. All right. Chapter 9 is all about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. It is one of the most common things we've probably heard of, right? So as I start out most of these classes, let's talk about what comes to mind when you think of ADHD. Not being able to concentrate, okay? Beckley, what's something that you guys come up with? What comes to mind when you think of ADHD? Don't everyone jump out at once. I will call on people right now.
Being hyper.
Being hyper, okay? Charleston, what else? Let's get one of you guys again. Isaiah, what comes to mind when you think of ADHD? Hyperfocus. That's absolutely true. That's an aspect people don't think about. They always think about the inattention, not really the hyperfocus part of it too. Very good. I like this slide here that talks about there's some very misguided misconceptions that we people have about ADHD, and some more truths about it. ADHD is not a learned behavior. It is a medical condition. ADHD is not a discipline problem. It is a chemical imbalance. ADHD is not a spoiled child, and it is a big deal. ADHD is not a temper tantrum. ADHD is a battle for self-confidence. ADHD is not a choice. It is a fight to maintain focus. And ADHD is not the easy way out. It is a war between the brain and body. Lastly, ADHD is real. With that being said, ADHD is one of the most over-diagnosed mental disorders that there is. That doesn't mean that it's not prevalent, but it is overdiagnosed, especially in different cultures. Why do you think people are being overdiagnosed with ADHD? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an umbrella thing. Yeah. People kind of, and I think people a lot of times will self-diagnose either themselves or their child with ADHD just because they have a hyper, in certain situations. That's not true. I'm going to go over all the different diagnosing criteria and stuff here in just a second, but it is the most common neurobehavioral disturbance or disorder out there. It's the most common one. Typically, the two behaviors that you're going to see is poor sustained attention and hyperactivity or impulsivity. So with that being said, occupational therapy can assist in improving the interaction in between individuals with ADHD and the environment, improving quality of life. What does that mean? Kind of break that down for me. What might be a specific thing you can help somebody with ADHD? Beckley, what's something specific that you can do?
See what motivates that child to see, to try to get their mind off of everything else.
Okay, so just finding a motivating factor, that's a good one. What else might we do?
What do you say? What might we do? Like,
what's an intervention you might do that will help improve quality of life? So you have this poor sustained attention and the hyperactivity or the impulsing or the impulse behavior. What?
School, maybe have them in a smaller classroom.
A smaller classroom, less distraction kind of thing. Okay. A one-on-one. Okay, recommending like one-on-one. Okay. What else? Yeah.
Giving them devices that they can do with their hands that don't interrupt the class or
like fidget spinners. Okay.
Aren't those new things today?
The puppets.
Things?
Puppets. I think it's so funny. I have a niece who thinks that she's 9, thinks she's the most stressed out person on the face of the planet, and she'll like play with the puppet. And she's like, oh, this is just so relaxing. I'm like, well, you don't even know what stress is. You're 9, 3rd grade.
It's weird how those things just like trend.
It's crazy. And you know, when I was at the state fair a few weeks ago, they had these ones that are, I don't know, they're probably 8 by 8 square. They were $25. It's a piece of it's bubble wrap.
Yeah.
I was like, I used to get that stuff for free. I wished I would have been the one that come up with it, because you guys would not be seeing me here right now. I would be in Jamaica in a poppet house, you know. All right, so let's talk about some of the criteria. It's characterized by an early onset. This is coming directly from your book. Early onset, a lack of persistence in activities that require cognitive involvement. Breaking that down just a little bit just means a lack of activity that requires sustained attention. You have a tendency to move from one activity to another without completing any of them. Along with that, you have a lot of disorganization and unregulated or unpurposeful activity or movement, excessive activity. It says there the diagnosis includes 6 characteristics of inattention or 6 characteristics of hyperactivity. That means like 6 different types of inattention or 6 different types of hyperactivity, like the hyperactivity one, the extra motion, the, just the fact that they can't sit still, needing a fidget, something to help, stuff like that. Often, these symptoms, in order to gain a diagnosis, these symptoms have to be present in 2 or more settings. So just because a child is struggling in a setting of school does not necessarily mean that they have ADHD. Now, if you take them from school to home and the behaviors are consistent, there might be a diagnosis there. I think that's another reason that all too often people are, because they may struggle with school, and have that area where they're not able to pay attention in school, maybe because what they're talking about is boring and they need some kind of stimulation. Kids' main occupation, I don't know if Professor Trellis talked about this yet or not, but a child's main occupation is what? Play. That's their main occupation. So if they're sitting in a schoolhouse for however long the school day is, 7 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is, and they're not being stimulated enough and not being challenged enough, they can become bored, and then they want to self-stimulate, right? There are 3 different subtypes of ADHD. There's ADHD 1. This is more about the attention. Their main symptom is the inattention. ADHD 2. That main symptom is excessive motor activity, so the movement part of it. Lastly, we have ADHD 3. That's combination. That's both the inattention and the hyperactivity. Which one do you think is harder to treat or harder to cope with? 3, because you're fighting both sides now, the inattention and the good. Very good. So what does ADHD look like across the lifespan? Does anybody have any questions so far? I should probably stop and ask that. Good? Cool. All right, so around age 3 is where it starts to be more distinguishable. You're able to see these hyperactivity symptoms more. Early diagnosis is very important, as with many things that we talk about. But around that school age, the 3 years old, the preschool area, they're starting to get into that. That's when it's going to start being noticed and diagnosed. They're going to have a lot of trouble. The reason they say this is they're going to have a lot of trouble with organization or remembering supplies in these school age areas. What or who do you think is the first people that notice these behaviors? With that being said, like the age 3 area, who's the parent and who else? The teachers. The parents and the teachers. Those are normally the two people that pick it out first. They're the ones spending the majority of the time with this child, in theory, and that they're probably going to be the ones that pick it out first. As far as social deficits or being interact with other people, how do you think that's affected with ADHD? That's a big area people don't think about. Everyone, when you think of ADHD, at least in my mind, it comes with deficits at school and some problems at home that we're going to talk about here in a minute. But you don't really think about the social interaction part of it. How do you think that's affected with a child that has ADHD?
I feel like it could be harder for them to make friends.
Okay, why?
I don't know. I don't want to sound like offensive, but
No, I mean,
my brother has ADHD and
okay.
he was very annoying as a kid,
Okay.
and like kids were just.
So you were annoyed by his behavior?
Yeah.
Right. Why? What was annoying about it? What was the?
Maybe like some comments that he would make. He like would make comments that maybe she was keeping her head or loud.
Okay. So like inappropriate, more or less responses.
Yes.
Like this is not the time, this is not the place for that type of a behavior. You're right. So children with ADHD have 6 times higher rates of these type of behaviors, of having these inappropriate behaviors, according or in deviation with their peers. So if you're comparing them with their peers, they have a 6 times higher rate of having these impulsive behaviors that don't really match up with the situation. As far as moving forward in the lifespan, when you get into the more working age, what are some areas you think that are going to be did with someone with ADHD? Say they getting into their first job, what might be something that they struggle with?
Staying on task.
Staying on task. Okay. What else? Time management's big. What else? Organization. That's huge, right? That's absolutely huge with it, with ADHD. They're probably going to miss a lot of obligations or shifts, and not to any fault of their own, but because of this lack of organization, keeping track of their schedule, probably going to miss a lot of these things, right? They are also at higher risk for, as far as statistically goes, to fall to addiction of some sort. It's just more of a stimulating kind of thing. It goes into brain chemistry and whatnot. Let's go into adulthood. What are some things that they're going to struggle with in adulthood? Nothing. They struggle with nothing. Relationships.
Like romantic relationships.
Absolutely. Romantic relationships, huge. In what way? How would that be more difficult?
Maybe like getting, like dealing with your emotions in that way.
Okay. Dealing with emotions. Okay. What about even the fact of organization, being able to plan, a date or something, even something like that, being able to plan something out, and then the inappropriate behaviors or not being able to respond to things in an appropriate manner, right? Very good. What are some other things at home and adulthood? I didn't mean to stay at home, but there's your hint. What at home? What they keeping a house clean? What else? What is a huge part of being an adult? Yeah, Becca, go ahead.
I feel like paying bills and keeping on time with bills and stuff.
Huge. That's exactly what I was going for. Paying bills. Thinking about, I hate paying bills, not just for that, but keeping track of them. It's such an aggravating thing. I think about someone with ADHD, keeping track of that. Okay, this is due at the 3rd of the month, and making sure it's paid at all times. So they're going to be struggling. What about him? We talked a little bit about work and missing shifts and things. What about like specific job tasks, being able to stay and get things done on time, being able to make sure that their boss is happy with their job performance? All these areas are going to be affected, so a whole lot more stress on the person too, right? All right, etiology and prevalence. What does etiology mean? The cause. That's it. All right, so there's nothing that says this is the cause of ADHD. There is some environmental factors like exposure to heavy metals, like mercury and lead, but there's more ongoing research about this all the time. There's statistically, it says families which one parent has ADHD, the child has an 80% chance of having ADHD. So it's a dominant allele. Throwback to biology class, alleles. There's a difference in how the brain is organized, and different pathways. Statistically, the prevalence says about 5% of the population has ADHD, and twice as many boys as girls. Any questions? All right, cool. We're going to go through different areas of occupation. This is going to be a lot of discussion with you guys in order, to see where you guys are at with this. All areas of occupation are going to be affected with ADHD. In every single way, something is going to be affected one way or another. Everything. Do you think that someone with ADHD is going to be able to make choices very easily? Probably not. And if they do, they might even be a rushed choice, not a well thought out, is this the right thing to do? Even the fact of being able to pay attention, where you said the hyper focus aspect of it, like not paying attention to the right thing. For example, sitting in this classroom, see something outside, pays attention to that rather than the lecture. That is not, they're hyper focused on what's going on outside, not what they should be focused on. That goes all into the choice making part of it too. These behaviors or deficits in executive functioning becomes much more apparent when there's multitasking required, when goals are set in place, like this is what we need to reach. Tasks that have a particular sequence, so these are the steps in order to reach this goal or complete this task. When there's multiple stimuli coming in, it's a very, stimulating environment. It makes it more difficult for executive functioning. And then lastly, if there's a conflict between what needs to be done and what they prefer to do, what do you think that means? Or can someone give me an example of that, where they may have something that they want to do or prefer to do and what they have to do?
Getting your homework done, but they want to play outside.
Absolutely. And not being able to focus on the homework at all, because the only thing on their mind is I want to go outside and play. Right? Very good. Huh? Procrastinating is a big part. What do you mean by that? Right, don't wait till the last minute to do things. That's a big part of it, right? Probably so what you're saying is maybe people with ADHD don't work great under pressure then, right? Like that last second kind of deal. Okay. Some sensory motor abilities. They're going to have a tendency for over responsiveness, not having the correct response to a stimuli. Motor deficits, that overactivity. That is such a major issue. People don't understand how OT can help, especially in school systems. Besides the fidget things that we have talked about, which is kind of a new thing, OTs have been using them for a long time, and now they're just like the next popular thing. It's pretty crazy. I was having lunch, one day with an OT in Beckley, and she said that she wishes, like, she's been using fidget spinners and puppets. That stuff has been out for a really, really long time. It's just now that everybody else is like, wow, this is awesome. Let's sell them for $2 on Amazon and be a billionaire. What are some other things?
Weighted blankets.
Weighted blankets are a big one too.
Fuzzy, like something soft.
Mhm.
That they can play with in their pocket.
Yeah. What are some other ones? A stress ball. Okay. Let's get away from the fidgetness of it, of having to feel and touch and things like that. What's another area we can help with motor deficits? Think about it. When you think about a child that has ADHD, what are they struggling with in school? What are they not able to really do? Sit still. Yes, that was a great one. Sitting on a ball, or they actually have those chairs now that has an exercise ball as the seat and has a back on it. I've seen OTs have that kind of an intervention where they can kind of, bounce on the ball rather than, getting up or trying to run around the classroom or not being able to sit still and constantly fidgeting. Very good.
A lady on TikTok, she's an OT.
Yeah.
For kids, and she does like a resistance band around the leg chair.
Yeah.
So you can sit and do it.
Yeah, that's another really cool one. They will even have them where they can kick them out and all that other stuff. Yeah, it's pretty. OTs have gotten really creative in school systems, and like I said, all their ideas are being stolen and sold as the next, cool toy. All right, let's go to ADLs. There's not a lot of research as far as how much ADHD affects ADLs and IDLs in all these areas. We as a community can say it is affected, right? There's not really, but there's not a lot of people that are saying, I'm going to research that. There's not a lot of data. It's kind of one of those things that we understand that all areas of occupation are being affected. So, and again, parents are the ones who sense this early on if they have trouble with bathing and eating, sleeping, getting dressed, all these different things, not being able to focus on tasks, picking up toys. It also makes it difficult if you have a child that doesn't have ADHD and a child that does have ADHD, and comparing the two, like, why aren't you like your sibling, and all this other stuff. It makes it very frustrating because you have to parent in a totally different way between the two children, right? She's like, huh? That's you and your brother. But, yeah, it's very difficult when you go back, and it's hard to go back and forth between the two and switch those roles, right?
Something that I figured out with my brother for an ADL standpoint was like he couldn't shower at nighttime because the water was like too much stimulation on him.
Really?
Yeah, so it would keep him up at night. So he like couldn't figure that out.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's a common thing too.
Was it just the shower part, or could he actually maybe take a bath or something instead?
I don't think he liked that.
He didn't like that. Oh, okay. I understand. I got you.
So, like all the, if you think about it, it's
It's
a
lot of going in.
sensation.
The heat, the pressure from it, the sound,
Yeah.
the visual. There's a lot of just in a shower. So much information coming in at once, right?
Yep.
Very good. All right, so let's talk about some family interactions. Again, this is going to influence the family's entire routine. It's going to, like you said, it might take longer to shower, bathe, or dress, or whichever. How would you think a parent would describe a household? Noisy. What else? Argumentative. Okay. What else? Jennifer. You have no idea. How would a parent, come on, how would a parent describe their household if they have a child with ADHD? Do you think it's peaceful? It's just moving right along? Okay, what would be the opposite of that? Unorganized. Very good. Chaos. Chaotic. Yes. What else? Hectic. Is that what you said? Yeah. Oh, loud. I thought you said chaotic. Or hectic. Oh, sorry. I thought that's what you said. You should have been like, yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, that's what I said. I was I got you. So do you think that this makes it difficult between the parents and the parents' relationship with each other? Why? Makes them argue more. They now you can't just decide on one way to parent. You have to decide on two different parent styles between two different people. Think about all that goes into. My brother also has ADHD, and my mom was more the caring, understanding one, knew, and then my dad was like, sit down, like stop.
Especially, it's hard to understand how they're feeling. So, like, if a parent's not being open-minded, but
Right.
One is,
Right.
they're not going to get the same page.
That goes into education too, right?
Mhm.
Like, reaching out, finding this information, talking to a mental health provider, finding out, how can I help this child? Rather than just this one needs an extra time out or needs a whooping or something, you know what I mean?
At my house, it's like my mom is a truck driver's daughter, so she uses her dad's tone for me. So if I get in trouble, I get her tone.
Yeah.
And my dad's like, all right, you can go.
All right. It's definitely different. You have to go back and forth. You got to turn it off, turn it off, on kind of thing. All right, so academic function. I like this little quote up here in the top. It says, kids with ADHD need specific instructions. Instead of clean your room, try saying, put away toys and make your bed. Something more specific than just clean your room, because that's a larger task, something very specific. I want you guys to write down that website. I put the link on your e-learn under chapter 9. It's called Raising the Blinds. It's a resource for parents to find tips and things on how to raise a child that has ADHD, they even offer counseling services on there. It's a really cool website for those situations. As far as academic functions go, they're probably gonna have poor academic achievement, just statistically speaking. That's not, all the way across the board. Of course, people that have ADHD go on to be very successful people, but statistically speaking, we see a poor academic achievement. We talked about some reasons why that might be, like the poor organization or missing important information due to, the inattention, or poor time management, or, not being able to take into account that deeper thinking that it takes with certain concepts, right? Some other instances that can cause some academic issues is not being able to complete the tasks, not being able to have positive interactions with teachers, having disruptive behaviors. They have a lower or a higher prevalence of school dropouts. That's a lot of the times due to lack of education in school systems, people not knowing how to help children with ADHD. Some emotional consequences can be if, the dropout not feeling included, stuff like that leads to lower self-esteem, things like that. It's an issue because people are not taking the time to understand what a child with ADHD is going through. All right, social and leisure participation. Does anybody have any questions so far? Good. Okay.
So in elementary school, I had all F's from first grade to fourth grade. Then I came out with top 4 of my class in high school.
That's great. That's awesome. Was there?
I came out with honors scholarship.
That's great. Congratulations. That's great. That's really cool. As far as social and leisure participation, there's going to be a deficit in interpersonal abilities to make these relationships. Children with ADHD have significantly lower engagement in leisure activities. I think that's a concept that's kind of hard to wrap your mind around, because wouldn't you think they would have higher engagement in leisure activities, things that they want to do? No, nobody thinks that. I'm the only one.
Like things that you do on their own with your children.
Just a leisure activity. So don't you think that a child with ADHD would probably engage more in things they want to do rather than things that they don't want to do? Yeah, you would think so, right? Actually, it's the opposite. Why do you think so? Why do you think it might be lower? Overstimulation. Yeah, I can see where you're going with that.
Like leisure activities, like
Anything, playing outside or whatever they want to do. Why do they have, let me put it this way, why do they have less time to do things? Lower engagement in leisure activities. A poor decision making, the poor time management, thinking about children and the parenting aspect of it. Why do you think they can't do leisure activities? In trouble a lot, right? They don't have the opportunity to do these leisure activities and things because they're needing extra time with work. They're going to have more time in the evening doing homework or cleaning the room, chores, anything like that. There's going to be more stuff that needs to be laid out for them, and there's not going to be a lot of time left over for leisure. That's not cool, right? It needs to be more balanced, and that only comes really with education. All right, almost done there. We got work next. That can it'll result in a reduced productivity or maybe even a loss of income if the boss is uneducated about what needs to be done, these reasonable accommodations we've talked about. Not a lot of information on how to help these individuals, kind of a, hey, you're not doing your productivity, you're fired kind of aspect, which is not cool, right? We've talked about there needs to be reasonable accommodations. This is a mental disorder. I was going to ask you about your perspective on this. Have you placed people with ADHD in jobs and things like that? Okay, what kind of, when I'm putting on here, pick jobs to their strengths, it's probably something you had a lot of experience with, right? What would be an area or an example of a job you might place somebody with ADHD in?
No, like, so a lot of the people I saw, like, to be honest, ADHD was one of the lower mental disabilities that they had. It didn't affect them as much as other things
Okay.
did.
Okay.
So, I don't know. Maybe like I can't even like specifically say like someone with just ADHD.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. In general, something that has a less strict environment at work is going to be more beneficial. Something that is not as rigid, you can, have some flexibility in time, and, this goal doesn't have to be met by this time. There's a little bit, leisure, extended periods. There you go. All right, so talking about medication, stimulants are actually the most common. This is because of the lack of inattention. Some common ones are Ritalin, Dexedrine, Cylert, and then Adderall is another really common one. Non-stimulants are Strattera is a big one. And then individuals often have difficulty adhering to these medication routines, which kind of makes a cycle, right? Like I was saying earlier, my brother has ADHD and he would miss his medication. His teachers would write home or call home and be like, did he miss his medicine today? That kind of a thing. Right. Droggy, these kind of things too, for sure. Let's look. I want to show you guys a couple of videos. Beckley, I know that there's been some issue hearing the videos. You guys can mute this presentation. The links are on your eLearn. There are two. There's a TED Talk and one called A Day in the Life of Someone with ADHD. But don't go away from this lecture because we're going to do an exam review. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to study, so don't go anywhere. All right, let's watch this one first.
I wake up suddenly, search for my phone. What time is it? Oh, okay, still early. It takes me a while to fall back to sleep, restless waiting, but as soon as I do, the alarm goes off. The snooze button I trade punches until my fiance turns it off. I jolt awake. What time is it now? I scramble for my phone. 11 a.m. Shoot! I growl at my fiance. Why did you turn off the alarm? I stumble toward the dryer for clean clothes, but you're still in the washer. I start a new cycle, then dig through the hamper, literally sniffing for something to wear. I throw on semi-decent clothes, deodorant, mascara, and take my meds. Oh, I'm almost out. Shoot, gotta make an appointment to get another prescription. I grab a breakfast bar on the way out the door. And then I grab my phone. And back again for my keys. 11:19, still good. I'll make my meeting. 12:17, I should have called. So sorry I'm late. My friend is like phased. I can't decide if I'm grateful she isn't or depressed that she expected it. She says, I used to have trouble with that too, so now I just leave early. But this is what I hear. I can do it, why can't you? No, I'm trying. It never seems to work out. I don't get it either. She starts pitching an internet project she wants me to write, and I'm having trouble focusing. I'm doing a good job of attending though. I got the thoughtful nod down. Oh, I missed half of what she's saying. Oops. I start playing with my fidget spinner to grab my attention. Focusing gets easier, but this doesn't look good as a thoughtful nod. Until she's wondering if I'm listening now. The irony. I awkwardly end the meeting. I check my bullet journal, the only planner I've ever been able to sort of stick to see what's next. Okay, I've got research from 2 to 5 p.m., dinner to 5 to 6 p.m., writing 6 to 9 p.m., relax 9 to 11:30 p.m., and by midnight. Totally doable. I throw myself into the research until my alarm goes off at 5, reminding me to stop for dinner. But there's stuff I still don't understand yet. I'll just keep going until 6. Now at 7, I'm starving. I grab way too much food. Wait! I bring the food to my desk and begin typing furiously. I write half the assignment. I get a better idea and start working on that one. Wait, laundry. Not gonna beat me this time. I switch the clothes to the dryer. I sit back down to write, but the idea just doesn't seem as great now. Or I don't know, maybe I just don't really remember it. It's getting harder to hold all the thoughts in my brain while I work with them. The page in front of me is this random tangle of words. I'm getting frustrated. The timer goes off. I gotta change the laundry, except the dryer's still going. I set the timer for another 10 minutes and head to the couch to hang upside down and try to get my brain to work. Upside down, I remember I'm trying to get better about work-life balance, and I wonder if I should stop, even though I haven't got much done. Tomorrow's super busy. Okay, I'll keep working, but I'll stop at 10:30 and fold the laundry and relax. 10:30 comes and goes. I find a way back into that idea, and I'm in a flow. I can't stop. This is hyper-focus, and it can be both a blessing and a curse for those of us with ADHD. I write and write, rewrite, until my fiance comes to check on me and finds me asleep in front of my computer. He tucks me in, promises to do better tomorrow, to make more time for us, and to fold the clothes. He kisses me and tells me that clothes are just clothes. I hug him hard and see the time over his shoulder. Oh, it's 3 a.m. Tomorrow's going to be another scramble.
I think it's a pretty great video to show you kind of how hectic, going through someone's brain that has ADHD, how much stuff is coming in. And I think it is even the not purposeful behavior, like the whole, sitting upside down, the hyper-focusedness of it, the lack of inattention, disorganization. I think it really includes everything we talked about today. All right, so this, it does make you anxious, right? Right. With that being said, anxiety is probably the highest comorbid diagnosis with someone who has ADHD. So, all right. Now, this is a awesome little TED Talk about a lady who has ADHD.
I almost forgot I have a duck. Hi everyone. In the next 18 minutes, I'm gonna change your life. Nick, who am I kidding? I cannot change anybody's life in 18 minutes. I just said that to grab your attention. But what if it's not easy for you to pay attention at any time?
I think it's funny they use the same slide I did.
My name is Nagar, and today I'm here to talk about ADHD. Growing up, I was that kid that I could not sit still. I was always at principal's office, although I was known for being overly polite and docile. But somehow, all the trouble at school was linked to me. I used to hear it from all my teachers that you do not understand how smart you are and how stupid you are at the same time. People wish they had your brain. They work as twice as hard as you, and the result they get is just half the result you get. And you waste all that potential. Hearing that made me feel guilty about myself all the time. I was so mad. What was wrong with me? I was so weak that I could not focus on something and get a work done. Back then, neither I nor anyone around me knew about ADHD. But what is ADHD? ADHD inattention, deficit hyperactivity disorder. So there are three different characteristics of it. It's hyperactivity, inattention, and impulsivity. And there are three different kinds of people with ADHD. Those who are predominantly inattentive, those who are predominantly hyperactive, find out about that, and those who are lucky to have both of them at the same time, and those are the most common. There are theories that say that that part of your brain that is responsible for paying attention and is higher level of awareness and conscious, it's less developed and it's smaller in people with ADHD compared to normal brains. I mean, let me correct myself. In common kind of brain. That's why all the stimuli make their way to our higher and upper level of awareness. That's why people with ADHD turn with slightest noise. So let me tell you what I mean when I'm talking about difficulty to pay attention. I do understand that all of you have those days that you cannot focus on the task you have to get it done. But people with ADHD, they have 365 days in a year of those days. Like, let's say you have an important thing in your life. Let's say giving a TED Talk. Everybody will think to remember those words that they chose carefully. They try to remember the lines and they think about their body language. But people with ADHD, oh my God, you are such a nice guy, I like it. I'm sorry, people with ADHD get distracted even in most important time of their lives. If I want to talk statistically, 3% of the population have ADHD.
It's actually 5%.
By the time I was writing this brief, there were supposed to be 100 people here, so my statistic might be a little bit up. But beside me, in this room, there are 2 other people with ADHD who are probably not listening to me anymore because they're distracted. And if I want to tell you how that could impact our lives, I need to share some of my personal experiences with you. In the second semester of my undergrad, I started skipping 100% of my classes. Why? Because I forget that I have a class. I almost forget everything. And even if I do remember that I have a class, I'm always late. You saw it. And even if I do survive that as well, when I go to the class, I get extremely bored. I cannot sit still and listen to the teacher or the instructor. And I will probably end up distracting other people. Because of that distraction and forgetfulness, we tend to lose our stuff more often than other people. Look at this picture. I lost everything in this picture. The only thing I didn't lose is my head, because it's attached to my body. And no, I'm not one of those people with 100 kind of Visa cards and credit cards. I only have one, but I keep losing it. I have to replace it every time I get a new one on my Uber account. So we have some sort of information, like I know that in our school, the library door opens 7 times per hour on average. How do I know? I count. Every time that door opens and closes, I turn. And I have this impulse after that to see who comes in and who leaves. And no, I'm not nosy. It's just my brain. That's how it works. ADHD is correlated to dopamine. If you don't know dopamine, that's reward hormone. Our brain wants wants more dopamine than other brains. To just feel alive, we crave to stimulate those dopamine receptors. That's why, although if there is absolutely no external distractibility, our brain can have that state of internal distractibility. Like when you're alone, you never get bored. We always have a party in our brain, and we get to choose all the songs. But when you're around other people, if you're not really interested in what you're saying, even though if you're looking us into eyes and talking to us directly, we cannot listen to you. But if we are getting that dopamine more and stimulating those dopamine receptors more, what could the result be? When it comes to creativity, when it comes to problem solving, our brain works amazingly. We are willing to take risks 3 times more than other people. That's why it's more possible for someone with ADHD to start their own companies and business and be successful in it. We love experiencing new things and sick thrills. And we have sense of humor. You're fun to be around. And we probably are the one with charisma in the room. So it is likely for us to get into relationships or get married as much as other people. But because of that forgetfulness, impulsivity, and sometimes aggressiveness, it's more possible for people with ADHD to get divorced or end that relationship. They can actually end the relationship impulsively and regret it in an hour. And speaking of impulsivity, we act on emotion. It's like we want something and we want it now. We have that excessive urgency of wanting something and we want it immediately. We cannot wait for it. By showing of hands, tell me, how many of you had those moments that you were so upset, you wanted to cry? You were so mad that you wanted to flip the table and slap the person in front of you. You were so excited. You wanted to hug everyone. Right? You all feel it. But we actually do it. You know that thing in your brain that stops you from not saying stuff or not doing stuff? Yeah, we don't have that. That go ahead and do it button in our brain works way faster than the brake button. That's why we're emotional and we act on our emotion. We cry if we feel like it. And if you're excited, everybody will know. And if you're mad, it's more likely for us to get into fights. Another characteristic is aggressiveness. Who's aggressiveness? I meant hyperactivity. That was a real ADHD here. When you're hyperactive, it's like throughout the day, you're driven by energy. And you probably talk excessively. Having energy throughout the day, that's good. But that can lead to restlessness and insomnia. I read this joke online and I really relate to it. It was like, if someone with ADHD wants to do those methods of sleeping because they have insomnia, they would probably be like, 1 sheep, 2 sheep, cow, dog, old MacDonald, had it, and we probably forget that we wanted to sleep and we get distracted and we start doing something else. But why am I telling you all of this? I'm 27, and I just got diagnosed recently. When I was 7, I was diagnosed by asthma. I'm quite a packaging. My parents recognized those signs and symptoms very soon. It took me
me to those best doctors and specialists, and they took care of it. And I was that good patient at the doctor office because my asthma was under control and I took all my medication. So what was the reason that my ADHD was not diagnosed until 20 years later? It was not misparenting. It was because my parents were educated that if the child is busy, if there is a shortness of breath, that means that your kid has asthma. They didn't know anything about ADHD. Best case scenario, let's say that they knew about ADHD science difference. How would you feel if I come to you and be like, hey, your kid has mental disorder? You wouldn't accept that. You deny it. Who wants the kid to have mental disorder? It's not a disorder. It's difference. Only because your brain works differently, that doesn't mean that it's anything less than other people's brain. So don't label it. Don't scare people with those labels. Those kids with ADHD, they can benefit from ADHD. Their ADHD is not a disorder. It's an opportunity. So if you have ADHD, that means that you're genetically designed to be successful. It's like you're tall and you have more chance of being a successful basketballist. Or it's like you have a ticket to Elvis's concert, but you actually need to show up to the concert. Or like you want to cook. You, like everybody else, have those ingredients, but you, and only you, are the one who has saffron as spice. I know that when I started, I said 3% of the population has ADHD. But think about it. Only 3% of the population has ADHD. So diagnose it, manage it, and by managing it, I don't mean that they got it all. Keep calm. Do not keep calm. Take advantage of that ADHD and those differences. Embrace it. Own it. Do not be embarrassed of it. Would you be embarrassed if you have kidney stone? And why would you be embarrassed if your brain works differently? So if you find it almost impossible to focus, if you're always locked out, and you cannot ask for help because you also lost your credit card, and if you talk excessively, that sometimes you bore other people, and other people always bore you, or if you talk sometimes so fast that other people have difficulty to follow what you're saying, congratulations, it's ADHD. So I'm gonna introduce myself one more time. My name is Nagar. I'm 27. I was diagnosed with ADHD. So was Albert Einstein. Thank you.
All right. Just to give you a little bit of a different perspective, clearly she has a positive outlook on it. And I agree with a lot of what she says that, statistically speaking, outcomes are different from all kinds of different ranges of people, right? It's more about education and putting them in the right circumstance in order for them to be successful, right? All right, do we have any questions on chapter 9? No? Beckley, do you guys have any questions? Send me a message or something in the chat or whichever to let me know that you guys are still here so you're for the exam review. All right, I see Lakin is here. Oh, got a couple. 3, 4 more of you. Okay. Barack, are you here? I think it was Cool. Rock, you're the only one I'm waiting on. If you're not, just listen to it on the exam review. So how my exam reviews, how I do them, is I'm just going to basically give you a study guide for you to write down as we go, okay? The way that I come up with these study guides is actually go through, I got the exam, I set it up, and then I go through and take the exam myself. Just say, hey, does this make sense? How could I reword this? What would be beneficial for them to know in order to answer this question? So this is about as beneficial as I could possibly get for you guys, okay? Got pen and paper, ready to roll? All right, there are 41 questions on this exam. You're going to want to know what evidence-based practice is, the definition of it, why is it purposeful, you're going to want to know figure 5-1 in your book on page 69. Talks about evidence-based practice. 5-1, figure 5-1 on page 69. Okay, we want to know the 4 different types of research: the efficacy, predictive, assessment, and descriptive research. The 4 types. There's going to be a couple things here I did not mention in lecture. That is on purpose because you need to go back and read your book for it anyway. Phenomenology studies, grounded theory, and narrative research.
What was the last one?
The different types of, the last thing I said, narrative research. It's phenomenology study, grounded theory, and narrative research. Okay. You have trustworthy characteristics of different types of research. That's the credibility. There's 4: transferability, dependability, and confirmability. Yeah. Solid. Cool. All right. You're going to want to know the levels of evidence, levels 1 through 5. Basically, I'm going to give you a scenario. Say this is what you have, or this is what this person has. What level of evidence is it? Let me ask you guys a question. Is Asperger's syndrome its own diagnosis? No. No. What is it under?
Autism.
Oh, there it is. Layton's got it. ASD. Okay. As far as autism goes, you want to know the cause of autism, the etiology we talked about, how to diagnose it, the problems, and the medications that are common. Okay. You're going to want to know on page 111 in your book, there's a table there. It's table 7.4. That's all about the different interventions for autism. There are several questions that come out of that table. You're going to want to know that table like the back of your hand. Okay? 7.4. Yep. Good? All right, you're going to know about the different levels of severity with intellectual disabilities. Okay. You're going to know about ADHD and the transition throughout the lifespan from childhood to adolescence, adulthood, all that different stuff, and the problems that they face at each area. You're going to want to know about executive functioning and how is it affected by the disorders we've gone over so far. What executive functioning is.
And how it's affected with like autism, ID, and
Yeah, how executive functioning is affected in general with those disorders, and what executive functioning is, what it entails. And then you're going to also want to, there's several questions from the Temple Grandin movie. I think there's 5 that are very specific and you would only know if you watched the movie. Okay? Again, there's 41 questions. They're all multiple choice. There's, I think, a couple true and false. We will take it Tuesday at in class. It starts at 10:45. You have all the way through 12:15 in order to get it done. Okay. So what I'll do is when the exam is all turned in, I'll review grades, all that good stuff. Looking at both Beckley and you guys, if the majority of the class did not get a question correct, I will automatically review that question, and I will say, you know, was it a bad question? Was it obvious? Did they just not read it? Is it word for word in the book? Or, you know, like I said, I give you the opportunity to talk to me about why you put the answer that you chose. If you can convince me, then I get points back. But I'm telling you, that's a much harder task than what you think. I know that when Brady came and talked to you guys, it was like you can talk to him. He won about maybe 10% of the time. Yeah, he would say that. He would say that. But we can talk about these questions. It's all about a learning opportunity. We're here for your guys' success anyway. You know, but this exam, if you read your book and you watch that movie and you study these things that I've told you, you will do fine on the exam. Okay? Any questions for me? Beckley, do you guys have any questions? All right, I'm going to assume no. Hearing none. All right, I'm going to stop